Hi, everybody, and welcome to another round of Saturday with Stephanie. We are continuing our journey through the Ten Commandments. We are sticking with the Catechism and Luther's question and answer format, and we are currently on the fourth commandment. So this one says, at least in the Catechism, honor your father and your mother. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities, but honor them, serve and obey them, love and cherish them. So this is one where I actually want to read to you from Exodus chapter 20, and verse 12 is where we find this particular commandment, because the way that I learned this one, it was a little bit longer. In the newer versions of the Catechism, they've removed some of the extra language, but I think it's important. And in Exodus 20, chapter 20, verse 12, it says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You might remember from last time, or maybe the time before, where I talked about the third and the fourth commandment are particularly unique. The third commandment is both a command and an invitation. And the fourth commandment, the unique thing about it is it's the only one of the commandments that has a very specific promise tied to it. And that is, we are called to honor our father and mother, and then it says that your days may be long in the land your God is giving you. One of the jokes that I always kind of make with this one is, and I think it was from a movie or a TV show, but where the parent is talking to a child, and I can't remember if it was the mom or the dad, who said, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. And it's a joke, but it's also, your life will be long if you obey your parents, if you obey authorities, all of those things. There's this promise that's tied to the commandment. So it's particularly unique. So looking at the description, we should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities. And we talk to people about this particular commandment because while it does say honor your father and your mother, those are the first authority figures that all of us have in our lives. That for each of us, there are always authority figures. Maybe it's your boss, or law enforcement, or maybe you weren't raised by your parents, maybe it was your grandparents. For those who are still in school, teachers, professors, that kind of a thing. Even just direct supervisors through work, any of those authority figures. And this includes those who lead in government, who are authority figures over us. And I know for some these days that's particularly difficult. It's difficult for me. I tend to be very cynical when it comes to politics in general. And it's very, very easy for me to fall into the camp of talking badly about those who are leading, state, local, or national level. I just get very frustrated by the entire system. But we are called to honor, serve, obey, love, and cherish. And it's tough sometimes. You know, especially talking about this in an election year, it can be difficult to separate our choices on who we're going to vote for from our opinions about those people. And that's understandable. And we want to perhaps be able to convince others of our position and have them come alongside of us. But I don't know if you've noticed this, that more and more likely it is, we're not going to change someone else's mind or convince them to vote the same way that we are. Instead, what ends up happening is we will talk badly about one person or another person that's running for office, just for the sake of talking badly about them, because we don't like choices they've made. We don't like decisions that they've carried out. We may not agree with things in their character, but we're not speaking about them in such a way to convince someone to share our opinion. Instead, we're just complaining just to be heard. And that goes against this commandment. For me, it's probably one that I break far more often than I should. It's very easy to just sit back and complain and never do anything about those things. And I've been known to do this before in my work environments. If I have a boss that I haven't particularly agreed with, that it's really easy to come home and just complain about that person to my husband or to family members. These days, working with my husband, I don't tend to complain to him about my coworkers. But it's really easy to fall into that habit of dishonoring those who are in authority over us. It doesn't mean you have to like them or agree with them. It doesn't even mean that you can't blow off steam from time to time or need to once in a while complain. It's having an awareness of where is the tipping point from just blowing off steam into dishonoring that person, and paying attention to that. This particular commandment we pull out often when we're dealing with kids, and reminding them that they need to honor their father and their mother. I've even heard it used, unfortunately, with adult children, where someone in the family will try and use it to shame them into doing things that their parents want them to do, when what they have done is appropriately left home and cleaved to their spouse, and started a new family, and that their primary priority is for their household and not necessarily for their parents. That doesn't mean you don't honor your parents. It just means that when we're in adulthood, how we honor our parents looks differently than when we live in their home, under their roof, under their rules. Those rules for how often we visit need to be decided based on what's appropriate for our households in adulthood, whether it's best with children and their schedules or their school environment. In some circumstances, it's an unhealthy relationship that has come from the parents, and needing to separate from that a little bit. And that's okay too. Remembering that we can still honor our parents, be respectful to them without necessarily doing everything that they want us to do. And it's hard. It can be hard when you lose a loved one, when you lose a parent. And I've seen it time and time again where people will try their hardest to do everything that that person would have wanted to see happen. Maybe with the funeral or whatever else, to try and honor that person. And that's good to a point, but it's also important to remember that once a person has left this world, they are with Jesus, and those desires that they had in this world no longer matter, because they are living in perfection. And whatever we do now is really about our relationships with those who are still here. And so trying to honor those relationships as primary. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that for the kids that are watching this, that they remember that your first and foremost calling right now, you are to honor and love and obey your parents or whoever it is that is raising you right now. And that's complicated too. I know there are so many families where there's been adoptions or grandparents raising or aunts and uncles or things like that because of broken relationships with parents, because of so many different circumstances that have created the situation. And it's a delicate balance of trying to honor all of those in authority, but especially whoever the head of the household is, wherever you are living. In fact, that's what we constantly point back to with the catechism, is as the head of the household, as the head of the family, should teach the commandments, the creed, baptism, whatever it is. And this particular commandment points to those who are living in that home to honor, love, and cherish those who are in authority in that house, those who are in authority in the world around us. It's not easy. It's not easy to do all of these things, but I want to point out to you that the meaning, what it says here, what does this mean? And it begins with, we should fear and love God so that we do not despise or anger our parents and other authorities. This doesn't necessarily have to flow out of having a good relationship with those around us. We do not honor and serve and love and cherish those in authority over us because they are somehow most deserving of it. Because sometimes they're not. Sometimes those people in authority will fail us. They are sinful human beings just like the rest of us. But we do it out of love and respect to God, who created all of us in his image. That doesn't mean that sometimes we don't need to stand up to authorities that are wrong in various ways. Sometimes that means voting for a different person because we disagree with the person that has been in leadership. Sometimes that will mean joining in protests. Thankfully, we live in a country where we are free to do that. Sometimes that means going to HR and talking about a specific problem with a boss. If there's something that has crossed the line from frustrating into inappropriate for the workplace. All of those things. If your household situation is such where the head of the household is abusive, sometimes it does mean leaving. And that puts you in a place of freedom where you're not having to obey inappropriate things that are asking you to participate in sin. I hope that makes sense. It's a complicated situation so often because, and this is going to be true of this commandment through all the rest of them. Remember, the first table we dealt with loving God. The second table, all these other 7 commandments are about loving our neighbor as ourself. And whenever we're dealing with loving other people, we first and foremost do it because of the love of God that flows through us. Sometimes that's going to be harder than others because we're dealing with other sinful human beings. And sin in the midst of relationships will almost always complicate things. But we constantly turn back to God, who is perfect in his love and forgiveness. And remembering that he is the one who guides all of our relationships. And when we put him in that place of being at the center of all of our relationships, all of these things make a lot more sense. It makes it a lot easier to discern between when should I be obedient to an authority and when should I stand up and say, this is wrong, I won't do that. And distinguishing between those things, it's always important to come back to the God who loves us so much that he sent his son to die for each and every one of us in our sinfulness, in our sinful, fallen human relationships, to bring us back into relationship with him, where we all belong perfectly. I thank you for joining me tonight. I hope this was helpful to you. Please let me know if you have questions or concerns along the way. We're going to continue with our journey through the commandments, and I pray that the Lord blesses your worship tomorrow. Have a great night.